So earlier this morning, you heard a panel on mind versus machine, and our next panel is called Mind plus Machine. How can AI help workers? Our moderator is Anant Agarwal, who is the leader behind creating online courseware for anybody on the planet Earth through edX. I'll invite Anant in, as well as his panelists, Fred Goff, the CEO of Jobcase, Professor Andrew Lowe of the Sloan School, and Sanjay Poderes, Managing Director of Accenture Labs.
Good morning, everybody. We're really excited to discuss mind plus machine. It's funny how, so I'm Anant Agarwal, CEO of edX, and also a professor at MIT. It's funny, you hear in the news all of these doom and gloom stories. There was this International Education Commission report led by Gordon Brown, sponsored by the UN, that said that by 2030, half of today's jobs will go away because of AI, automation, robotics, and so on. And then you wonder, my goodness, a lot of doom and gloom. But for some of us with a bit of gray hair, who've been around the block a few times, what we've really seen in industries is that things start out with a lot of hype and a lot of doom and gloom stories. And then when the hype cycle ends, usually what happens is things get blended. You see a merge of everything, and you find a better optimum. So just as an example, on retail, take retail. Amazon and other retailers are going to take over the world. But then 3 months ago, we heard about the acquisition of Whole Foods by Amazon. And now the big thing, so if you listen to professors at Tuck and so on in retail, they talk about omni-channel is the big word. How many of you have heard of this buzzword, omni-channel retail? The big buzz is not online, it's omni-channel, which is that omni-channel is a blend of both online and in person. In my own industry, so I'm the CEO of edX, and we're an online learning venture platform founded by Harvard and MIT. We offer online courses and programs from some of the best universities in the world, like Harvard, MIT, BU, Berkeley, Oxford, and others. And 6 years ago, when this whole movement of MOOCs, massive open online courses, started, everybody said, oh my goodness, we give universities 10 years, maybe 20 tops, and then it's game over for universities. But however, 6 years today, where are we? And we'll talk about this in the panel. We're seeing a lot more of blended activity, where we're seeing new micro-credentials that are a blend of fully online and fully in person. We're seeing new blended models of learning. So in industry after industry, there's an initial wacko cycle, and then reality dawns, and you get more into a blended model. So let me see what our panel thinks, if they agree with this view. Let me start with Sanjay. So Sanjay, you head up Accenture's online lab, and I forget the number, it's crazy. You're worried about training 400,000 and retraining 400,000 employees. And what's your thinking? Are you going to just, you do research in AI at your labs? Are you going to relegate all of these minds to machines and hope for the best? Or how are you thinking about it?
Well, Anant, I think one correction, it's not just 400,000 employees. In the new world, you have to also think about training all the bots in your company, right? Don't just think about training the humans. Start thinking about training the machines. Because more and more, in whatever you're doing, there will be a virtual agent or a chatbot or a robotic process automation script. Businesses are not static, they're changing every day. And you're not talking about retraining just people, which you're right, we have a mind-boggling number of 400,000 people to be trained, but we also have the new challenge of making sure that all these bots, the chatbots, the virtual agents, the robotic scripts, they are kept trained and ready as the business changes. So the challenge is a little bit more, and this is the new mindset. The human or the mind and the machine, they'll be working together, and the collective intelligence will help us make superhumans. So we have to look at it very holistically and not just humans.
You know, I understand the high-level philosophy, humans and machines will work together, but let's go to something very concrete and just push on you a little bit. So, so at Accenture, you do a lot of business process outsourcing, where there are forms, and I get it, those forms will be likely be automated and so on. But what about the people who are entering that data today, and their jobs get automated out, business process, out? So what about them? Where do you see this blend of mind versus machine coming in there? How do you see those jobs and that activity transforming?
Yeah, again, a very good question. In fact, I have observed this at a very close quarter because last 5 years back when this entire RPA thing started, my lab and us, we have actually reimagined the business process, right? I won't use the word re-engineer, but reimagine the business process. Because once you bring in RPA, it's not just about automating your old process. It's about using the robotics capabilities, using your people, and adding much more value in that business process for your clients. That is very important. So what we have observed is a couple of things happen. You are actually now helping your people to add more value to your clients. You don't want your people to be just doing work which a robotic script can do. So your main goal is not to keep your people engaged. Your main goal is to keep them engaged in a meaningful way, in a way that they add more value to the client. So you gave examples, for example, F&A processes, invoicing, procurement. Once the people are relieved of the day-to-day mundane work, they can now look into the invoice processing or procurement processing and say, how can we do this better, smarter, so that our clients benefit? Number one. Number two is, as we also saw when the IT revolution happened, is all these technologies start creating new jobs which were not existing before. For example, when you talk about the specific example you took, robotic scripts, you don't create once and forget. They have to be continuously trained or reconfigured as the business processes changed, right? End of the day, the accountability of a process is not with a machine. The accountability of the process is with the human. The responsibility to explain decisions is with the human. If things go wrong, you don't go and say, oh, the machine screwed it up, and we are not responsible. So, what it results in is a whole class of new jobs where humans are responsible for training, sustaining, judging the output, making sure that the man or that the mind and the machine, they work together with a collective intelligence for a greater good.
So let me see what you think, Fred. You're the CEO of Jobcase. Congratulations, you've done fantastic. I've often heard people talk about LinkedIn as the Jobcase of the West Coast. So it's a good job at what you're doing. One day they'll catch up. One day they'll catch up.
One day they will.
With what you're doing. So, so we hear some remarkable statistics. And I worry about even mentioning that statistic here in the hallowed grounds of MIT. So I hear that 2/3, 60 to 70%, 2/3 of people in the job market today don't have a degree, likely not interested in a college degree. And so take that piece of data, that they're not interested in a full degree. On the other hand, Sanjay and others talk about how the more manual jobs are going to go away, and we're going to have higher, more value-added forms of employment as the nature of work changes. And we'll need more people to tweak those robotic scripts as opposed to doing data entry. So, but then something doesn't compute for me. On the one hand, more and more people are eschewing an advanced or a college degree, while at the same time, people like Sanjay are out there saying we need more higher and higher levels of skills, where jobs are going to be upskilled, so to speak. And so the two don't compute for me. So, help me reconcile the two, or do you see some serious derailment happening as a result of these two forces?
Boy, there's a lot there. Let me start by informing the perspective that I have and what I think my value is to bring to the stage. Maybe the audience can help me real quick. If you could raise your hand out there, anybody who's bought a coffee at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks in the last week, can you just raise your hand and keep it up? And if you don't have your hand up, if you've received a package from Amazon in the last month, leave it up. All right, now keep your hand up, please, if you know how the barista got their job and what they're doing next, or the package handler got their job and what they're doing next, then keep your hand up. See, that's why you don't know my company so well. We have 75 million registered members. And what we saw when we created this is what is now being called the future of work. And a lot of the things we're talking about today, it's already here. And in fact, what machine learning is going to allow us to do is catch up. And what I mean by that is, if you think about what Jeff Weiner just talked about at the last LinkedIn Connect about the trends, which we would agree with, being AI and automation, being skills gap, being independent workers, that is trends coming at people already on a landscape where the average 25-year-olds had 7 jobs, according to the Department of Labor. And that stat's biased by traditional 4-year degree. You talk about a lot of folks we serve, the 67% high school grads, it's 7 jobs by the time you're 20, 21. We don't have the ecosystem to allow for people to currently, that's what Jobcase is working on, to have portable employee files that allow them to prove themselves and move forward. And so we have a community where we have a platform where a bunch of machine learning scientists that used to be focused more in Andy Lowe's world, after the Lehman bust, we decided, geez, there's going to be a lot of unemployment. What if we took all of these high-dimension skills of high-dimension optimization, predictive learning, machine learning, and what if we turned it around and really tried to empower people? Think of what we do as there's some great things going on in human capital led by folks like Anil Bousri at Workday, where he's allowing big data insights for great CEOs like Brian Moynihan to transform their organizations. We take those big data insights and we give them to each individual person. So Anant, when I'm answering this, we have this interesting perspective that I've got 115 employees associated very proudly with CSAIL, and 90 of them are data scientists, machine learning, software engineers, because it takes that advanced skills to build a platform like this. But who we dedicate every morning, noon, and night to when we wake up in the morning is thinking about exactly the majority of people that we're currently saying might be displaced by future of work, but today are living the decoupling that Professor Brynjolfsson was talking about. That today, the Fed will say 47% don't have enough savings to cover a $400 unexpected expense. That today are already living independent work because they're doing gigs and Lyft jobs to try to help pay the bills, or working extra Amazon part-time to get extra presents for their families. And so already these things are happening. With regard to education and with regard to our approach, we have a view that, first off, not everybody should go to college. They should not all go to college. Trades are an awesome view. Plumbers, electricians, there's construction workers. Not everybody enjoys learning in the way that a lot of folks in this room probably do. They shouldn't do it. There is an element of that 67% that should do it, and it's a shame that they don't have access. So there's a lot to tease out there. But when we think about how to empower people moving forward, and we think about how machine learning can benefit, to get to a mass customization of each individual person, the challenge is, if you have to do now just not the job that you get paid for, but you now are responsible of managing your own career, your own work life, and chances are the next move has to be to a different company, and chances are, if you're going to maintain even the same level of wages, you have to increase your skill set to go to that different company. That's a lot to figure out when you're working as many hours as you are to keep your family taken care of. And so what machine learning does is allows us to start making recommendations. And we have to be careful of embedded biases, but if we can make recommendations to show what's possible, and you get rid of job titles, because what the heck do those mean anyways, and you try to break it down into skills, proficiencies, and traits. And then you see things like Rusty did a great job articulating in the coal industry. And you see things that cashiers, if they, instead of thinking themselves as cashier at Giant Eagle grocery store in Pittsburgh, if they think of themselves as, well, I interface with customers, I do discrete functions, I interact with the machine putting data in, turns out they'd be great medical coders for Alan Blue's client. So it's about breaking it down. But then once you do that, then how do you figure out the education? And so our view of education is that we're in the beginning of a massive transition. Your great firm is one of the ones leading the way. But we think it's not about 4-year degrees. We think it's about breaking it down into bite-sized bits And we think the big change that's happening or will happen is that historically, we have had the provider of education also be the certifier of education. Carnegie Mellon gave me an economics degree and says Fred's good at economics. MIT gives a software engineering degree, says we're good at software engineering. But as an employer, do I really care? What I care is that you do good work as a software engineer, and if you self-taught yourself at night, and if Twitter said this was a great employee, that certifier of your competence means more. So the second we break apart the acceptance of a different certifier of proficiency from provider, oh my God, the world's the ocean. But to make it accessible to people, it's got to be not 4-year, 2-year courses, $40,000. It's got to be $1,000 to learn how to do a DevOps type of function or something like that, and then it gets customized.
We will definitely get back to education. I think education and the future of work are totally linked, particularly as you say, where if you look at people and say, hey, look, you have this basic competency, and if you knew a little bit more, hey, you can go and do this higher level task. And so there has to be sort of this continuous, lifelong learning that is happening.
Well, let me jump in there. That's exactly the point, right? So with respect, I think it's awesome what Rusty Justice and BitSource are doing, but the majority of people in this country won't code. What we need to do in the education program, the policy action I would love that would come out of things like this, that Daniela Russo's group and Lori Glover's done such a great job organizing, is K through 12. We have to train people to have continuous learning appetites, cognition, and the expectation of constant change that they themselves navigate. I think the expectations are wrong, the skill sets are wrong. We got to kind of go back to K through 12 and figure that out.
Got it. So moving on to yet another industry. Andy, you've probably been yourself responsible for a lot of the automation in the financial industry, where either way I look at it, I see bleak, the way from my layman's position, a pretty bleak outlook. If you believe that the stock market and the industry is completely random, then all I need is a robot sitting flipping coins and making decisions, and we'd be okay. It's completely automatable. On the other hand, if it's requires deep thinking and learning and all of that stuff, heck, we'll go build some machine learning algorithms and have robo-advisors. It's too hard for people to think about all the market movements and incredibly low latency, variations in pricing and so on between the Chicago exchanges and the New York exchanges, in which humans can't do much anyway. We have to rely on machines. So either way, if it's completely random, heck, machines can do it. If it's highly deep and low latency, humans can't do it. It has to be machines. So so there again, we sort of seem to be caught between a rock and a hard place. So how are you thinking about it? Do you think that mind and machine have both a role to play, or in your industry, do you think that really, the humans and the mind have little chance in the future?
Well, there's no doubt that automation has played an incredibly important role in the financial industry. The reason that you can trade on E-Trade or Schwab or any of the other electronic broker-dealers at virtually no cost nowadays is because automation has really reduced the frictions in the marketplace. And with particularly large portfolios that institutions like pension funds and broker-dealers have to manage, they could not do it without the automation that we have at our disposal. At the same time, you ask the question about how individuals deal with their portfolios. And we know that robo-advisors is the latest disruptive technology to come out of Silicon Valley, where many people are now being able to get their portfolios automatically managed by these kind of algorithms. An interesting thing happened over the course of the last couple of years. The S&P 500 has done very well this year, of course, but you have to think back to last year and the year before, where there were a few months where the S&P did not do so well, and people actually lost money for a change. And during the periods where people lost money, very interestingly, a lot of the clients of robo-advisors basically inundated the firms with phone calls because they wanted to talk to a human. They wanted to talk to a human when they were losing money. And I think this highlights the one aspect of AI that we have to keep in mind, which is that for certain repetitive functions that are basically commodity tasks, automation works fine. But when humans are faced with challenges that are very difficult to understand, like why did I just lose 7% in my 401k plan? Or during the financial crisis, why did I lose 50% of my 401k plan? Then it requires explanation. And that's the one thing that AI is just starting to do, but the AI that's implemented in the industry hasn't been able to do. It's something that one of the founding fathers of AI, Patrick Winston, has been focusing on, which is the notion of story. When we lose money, it's not enough to know that we lost 21%. We want a story for why we lost it and what we need to do going forward. And right now, AI does not provide us with the story yet. It's not that it couldn't, but it doesn't. And so that, I think, could be the future of financial AI.
You know, at the end of the day, I like to bring it down to, really, a very basic level. And I still see something not computing for me. So, when we were chatting the other day, you mentioned that in the New York Stock Exchange, for example, the stock exchange floor, it used to be really, really crowded in the past. But today, I was there a few months ago, and there's far fewer people out there. And you mentioned that there's the number of people out there is 1/5 than used to be there in the past, so 1 in 5. So I get it. The skills are getting up, nature of work is changing, there's more higher level things to be done. Instead of everybody, sort of doing things ka-chunk, 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 there's one person who needs to think a bit harder while machines do all the ka-chunk, ka-chunk stuff. So my question for you is, what about the remaining 4 people? We do talk about someone giving bad news. You need people to call and say, oh, the market crashed and so on. But what happens when the market is doing well? Or if there's fewer people, what happens to the others? So do you really think that everybody is going to be able to be moved into jobs where the mind and machine kind of coexist? Or you think it's going to be fewer people that are going to be needed in such situations?
Well, without a doubt, there are certain tasks that require fewer people. So trading, back office, reconciliation functions, those are the things that can be automated. And the question you ask is a really good one, because those people that were previously employed, they need to be retrained. And the question is, how do they get that kind of retraining? So one answer we know is that during the days of the internet craze, a number of our MBA students left the program after the first year to start companies. And shortly after the dot-com bubble burst, we realized that B2B stood for back to business school, and B2C stood for back to consulting. And so I think this aspect of retraining is really important. And this was made very plain to me in a rather surprising way that connects to what Fred said regarding the challenge between being able to get people jobs versus getting people degrees. Those are 2 very different things. So it came home to me in a very personal way a few months ago when my older son graduated from college. He developed an app while he was a senior, focusing on teaching people how to program in Python on the iPhone. And the app is called Pi. And when he told me about it, I thought it was kind of cute. But is that really useful? Because we have Khan Academy, we've got lots of other programs, edX, MITx, OCW, all the various different kinds of online resources. But he persisted nonetheless, and he and a friend submitted this app to the Y Combinator program, got selected, went through the program, and they got funding to develop this as a business. And so I was very puzzled by this. How can you make a business by giving away software or an app that teaches people how to program in a particular software language? And the answer is that when they launched, they had something like, they were number 4 in popularity in the App Store. They had almost immediately 100,000 monthly active users. And what was the attraction? The attraction is that they've partnered with firms that hire programmers. And so with their 100,000 active users, they can show the recruiters who the top programmers are and get them interviews at jobs. So effectively, what they've done is to take what Fred does and what you do and put it together. Never mind the degrees and the fancy courses and so on. You can demonstrate skill by using this kind of an app and get paid for it. That, in the end, I think is going to be what happens. And in the financial industry, we don't yet have that. But I suspect that in a matter of time, we will.
Could I one, that's an awesome story, and I got to check out that app now. If I could augment that, we were at a lunch yesterday, and I forget the lady's name, and I'm going to rob her of credit, but she was talking about how the phrase retrained, nobody wants to be retrained. So not to diminish what you're saying, Professor, but it's part of what's happening today is a reawaken, right? People are going to have multiple different jobs. The quote that Rusty did about John Lennon, life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. This is the opportunity, right? We're glass half full in terms of what we see in the economy. There's a lot of anxiety that's in our membership every day. Our basic premise is if you just take control of your own work life, all of these types of elements that can be headwinds, automation taking your job is providing for online training to make it free, but you have to take the reins. But it's about figuring out, it's not all about, well, how can we make people tech capable? I would disagree that all jobs are upscaling in skills. I think there's other, think about agriculture going from 47% in 1900 to 2% of the workforce in 2000. You know, you had customer service, you had data entry, you had just different jobs, sometimes more skills, sometimes less. What we have the ability to do now, and where you need deep learning tools that thankfully Google and Amazon and others are allowing companies like us to harness in MixNet and TensorFlow and the like, is the ability of opening up what's possible to people, getting a skill set to help them translate what that might be. We have know people who were in corporate jobs that had figured out they were good with people, they like to do other things, now they're being a subcontractor building houses. There are non-linear paths that might not be what we think of in an MIT community, like, oh, you should tech up, you should code. That's good for a finite set of people. But what we're in the cusp of, what's so amazing about the time we live in, is if you open up the realm of possibilities, you have the ability of doing something that, to what Eric Schmidt was saying yesterday, work that hits your identity, which will make you happier. But it's for each individual person to identify what makes you happy, what's your identity. It's just right now, we live in a time where it's easily to discover, and with companies like yours, achieve, and with companies like Pi to validate, and then companies like mine to help get placed. And so this is a really exciting time, but only for those willing to be proactive. If you're going to sit back, it's going to be really rough.
You know, it's very interesting that you know, we sort of keep coming back to training and education and the future of work. And you know, in virtually all the comments today, we talked about how the two are tied together. And you know, I'd like you to dwell on the following amazing thing, which is, so we are here at Kresge, you know, at MIT, and education is one industry. And this industry hasn't changed a whole lot in a long time.
Couple thousand years.
Exactly. And so the question is that while every single industry that you point to, you can see automation and AI coming in, you know, I'd love to get your thoughts on, do you think that education is going to be immune from it? Is there something special about education? Is it going to be immune for it? Or do you think that, you know, very soon, this industry, the education industry, is also going to be transformed either into, you know, a lot more machines playing a role or more of a blended role? What do people think? Sanjay, what do you think? You know, you've thought about training at Accenture, and again, that 400,000 number pops to my mind. Just so you realize, 400,000 is about 3 times as large as the total number of alumni of MIT in its 150-year history. Right. And so the numbers that you're looking at are staggering. So how are you? So do you think that education has, you know, a machine's going to play a role in education, or do you think that is going to be the province of humans forever?
No, definitely we will see a lot of technology coming to play. For example, the company that you lead, edX, or the Coursera's and the Udacity's, they are, you know, all the nano programs and stuff like that. So increasingly, you know, we recently released a research in MIT called New Skill Now. And there were 3 key things that came out of it. One was what we just heard about, you know, you need to have that growth initiative within you. It's up to you to make sure that you are keeping yourself up to date with the changing world, right? So people who have that growth initiative within them will succeed. People who are able to do continuous learning will succeed. And the third element was you have to start learning early. Okay, so try to teach people when they're young as much as you can. So you have to continuously learn and relearn. The other key things that we observe is the concept of adaptive learning, because, you know, none of us in this panel have the same background. But if we have to learn something new, we can have our own individualized learning boards or learning path to that new. And maybe that's where machine learning or AI can play a very important role to allow you to quickly ramp up to that new area. The other element is concept of micro learning or breaking it into chunks so that you can, and I think the app you just spoke about appeals to people because you can maybe learn while you're on the go, for example. So that is very important as well. The third thing we have been interestingly also working is how do you educate people who are outside the formal education, youths and women who want to go back to work. And we have been experimenting with new technologies like emotion AI. So how do you analyze emotions of people? So while you are taking a training, how do you figure out either from the voice tonal quality or the facial expression, what are the apprehensions you have, which areas you're not understanding, which areas you're feeling comfortable, and then can you have a very targeted intervention to help that person? So it's going to be the humans and the machines so that probably the course delivery gets handled more and more with MOOCs and with technology, but you need to go back to the experts when you have difficulties or you need to get deeper insights or experience. And that will be the role of the humans and the machine in quickly ramping you up and helping you pick up new skills. And that's what we are doing in Accenture.
No, I think that's a really good point. One of the things that at edX, where we scale learning and use machines to do it at massive scale, there are some incredible examples where AI and humans kind of work together. So for instance, first-level learner support. So when you have 13 million learners learning, it's very hard to have support happen completely using humans. So we do have humans do first-level support, but we're also using AI software that looks for patterns, and a fair fraction of support tickets can actually be handled completely automatically using machine learning technology. While if that technology cannot handle something, the ticket is kicked up for a human to handle. So we are certainly seeing examples where
I would just like to add one point there. For many of us who have done a Coursera course or things like that, online MOOCs, you'll figure out the value is in the collective intelligence. Because when you do these courses, not only you are getting the instructions online, but you have communities of other students. And then there's a very vibrant discussions on what you're doing, what are the challenges you are facing, and some other humans are also helping you. So I think it's the whole value is in that collective intelligence of humans and machines. When you bring them all together, you can ramp up quite fast.
So what's going to happen to, so what's the university of the future? I want to bring it back to the university, where university today is still very much in person. And frankly, in many universities that we partner with, the university documents talk about to get a degree, it has to be either completely in person or a significant, it's encoded into, enshrined in founding documents of universities and creating online degrees and online programs is extremely hard, particularly when you talked about sacrosanct degrees. So Andy, let me come to you. What do you think, is the 2-year MBA and business school, do you think that's hardwired? Or do you think 10, 20, 30 years from now, do you see a different world as sort of mind and machine are brought to bear on, let's say, business school education?
Well, I certainly don't think it's hardwired. In fact, we see changes happening already. But before I get to that, I want to just mention one aspect of this problem, which is just incredibly important. And that is the fact that university education, college education is getting more and more expensive, as we all know. Tuition is going up faster than inflation, way faster than inflation. And there's a reason for that. And this is a really important problem because it's making education more and more elitist, and that's actually not going to be sustainable for a stable society. In order for us to address this issue, we have to deal with the fact that educational technology, that phrase should be in quotes, because it's really laughable compared to the kind of technological advances we've made in other fields. Fred mentioned that we haven't made any advances in 2 millennia. Well, I would say maybe give us a little bit of a break. Maybe since the Middle Ages, we have not innovated. I think the classroom setting was really first created in the Middle Ages. Until and unless we can change that technology and make the delivery of education more efficient, the way that building a flat panel TV now is a lot more efficient than it was 10 years ago, we're not going to be able to bring down the cost of education. So how are we going to do that? Well, one of the things that we're seeing right now is that MBA students are becoming much more targeted and focused on what skills they need. They're expected to come out of school hitting the ground running, either in finance, accounting, marketing. They need to have domain-specific knowledge and, if possible, some practical experience already before they begin their jobs. And so how do we do that? We can't do that with a generic 2-year MBA. It's got to be a much more specialized degree, shorter time period, and a fair amount of outside learning going on as opposed to just inside the classroom. You know, we tried an experiment a couple of years ago. I've been teaching introductory finance pretty much since I began teaching 30 years ago. And one of the interesting things we did a couple of years ago, we tried to flip the classroom. We tried to have the students watch my lectures, which are all online and open courseware, watch them, and then have me work on problems in the class to show them, you know, how we make use of these kinds of tools. Surprisingly, that experiment was a failure. And it was a failure because the students said, you know, it's great that you took the time to flip the classroom and work problems, but that's not why we paid our tuition, to come see you do NPV problems. We want to hear from you, your unique perspectives on what's going on in the business world and how we might be able to innovate in order to join that community. In other words, we want the narrative, we want the story that only you can give us. We can figure out how to solve problems online. So what it means is that we actually have to change the online tools to make them dynamic, to use AI to choose the problems that we give them, to make them progressively harder, to tailor the experience to what they need to know. But what they want in the classroom is what they can't get from a computer. And my guess is that over the course of the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to see very big changes in the MBA programs along these lines.
I'm not sure about that. The thing that you're being humble about is you're Andy Lowe. Right? I mean, really, there's a difference. If I'm in MIT and I have the chance of having a class with Andy Lowe, you know how impactful you are in the financial industry. With respect to the professor at the University of Toledo in finance, it's different. So I think that's really the premier colleges are going to continue, pretty much as they are, because it's not just about the education, is it? It's access, and it's a sheepskin that's better because you're MIT or Harvard, and it's the community you get to involve in. I think that'll retain. It's actually got a risk to society because our income inequality has a chance of further bifurcating. But for most education, I think that it might be a different response if you were to say a teacher that they've never heard of before, try the same exercise. It'd be an interesting A/B test to see if you had the same findings.
Well, another aspect that you mentioned that is absolutely true is that the experience that they get coming together and interacting with each other, in many ways, that's as important, if not more important, than actually, you know, what they are able to.
Andy, I think that's true for maybe my generation. I have a few years on many of you. If you look at my kids, I think they think completely differently. I think the way they interact is like this. And they're interacting with other humans like this, with 6 other humans in 6 different geographies. And so I think it may be a generational issue again. But let me go back to something that you said earlier, which is that, you know, as you use AI for the 80 million people at Jobcase, and use AI to direct them towards, you know, to help them understand key competencies that they might have. And say, hey, look, you know, here's this job. Let me get really, really specific. Now, here's your competency. Here's the specific job. You know, it's a close cousin of who you are and what you know. And, you know, you could go and do this. And I would imagine that current state and the next state are going to keep changing over time. As jobs change, the work changes, it's going to keep changing. Our business schools today, our education system is one where you sort of come in. It's like fire and forget. You sort of come in for 2 years. I don't mean to pick on business schools, but since Andy's here, we'll pick on him anyway. You sort of come in here for 2 years, and I know some schools are talking about 1-year MBAs and are struggling with that. It's got to be a 2-year MBA. But on the other hand, as you talk about the future of work, people are going to be more dynamic, looking at, hey, I have this skill, I need to get this additional skill, and I can move into this career. So then again, I see the education system and the kind of the future work as, again, basically mismatched. So how do you see the future of work and the future of university? Is there an intersection? Or do you think Sanjay Poderes of Accenture will be doing his own training with emotional intelligence for his 400,000 employees. And universities will only be in the business of supplying the initial education as people come into the workforce, and they'll forever be cut off from kind of the continuous learning that people have to do throughout life.
I want to jump, there's a construct or a context of your question that I would like to challenge, because it's from the seat I sit in now. Why are we talking about MBAs in university, right? The issue that we're talking about is we have 67% of this country with a high school degree. You're never going to get more than 34% of this country in the history of the world going forward, more than that for education, because education is going to start breaking down. You've petered out. And within that, the top percent are going to be fine. That's the income inequality we have. When I say the future of work is here now, today people have to take multiple jobs to make ends meet. I heard somebody say yesterday that we don't have people dying because of the working 40-hour works in this country, but in other countries they do. They are. Are you kidding me? Like, what do you think the gig economy is about? These aren't people saying, you know, I choose to do Lyft instead of something. They're doing Lyft in addition to other things to make ends meet because of the wage stagnation Professor Bjornson calls the wage decoupling. And so the one thing I'd like to jump in on is we have an opportunity here. And you in the audience, like, look at your skills. Look how smart you are. Look where you are, right? Look what you can choose to do. You can cure cancer. You can go to the moon or whatever. What you choose to do with these skills, with this machine learning. Now that's it. Are you the nuclear scientist that's going to create power for France or going to create a bomb for someone to use? AI has huge potential. What I think is a really meaningful calling is to try to lift the rest of the workers in this country, because we're out of balance in capitalism. The shareholder value mantra that was so effective to make this country competitive again has gone too far. And employee activism is kind of lost out. And you have these really sad charts of employee participation of males going down, of females going down, people saying it's because of video games, people saying this. The problem is here and now, and I totally agree, education is a great way out, and we're breaking it apart, and it's a chance for us to do more. Right? Oh, and we're taking applications at Jobcase, by the way.
So let me bring this all down to earth in the last few minutes of our panel. Okay, so we had a terrific, wide-ranging conversation, and let's bring it really, really down to earth here. I'd like each of the panelists, I'm surprising you here a little bit, put you on the spot. Within your own industries or within your own experience, I'd like you to project either, or just example today, or 10, 20, 30 years from now, of a specific job or a specific instance where you see mind and machine working together to accomplish a result that is provably better than the state of the art today. Okay, and I'd like each of you to talk about a specific example. I don't want high-level stuff, oh, it's got to be better. No. Specific example of an industry and a job and a problem that they're trying to solve where the mind and machine together provide a level of service that is simply better than it is today. So why don't we start from Andy and move down the chain?
Very simple, portfolio manager. I believe that within 10 years, the role of a portfolio manager will basically be to provide investors with high-level narrative of what it is that they want to do, how they're going to be able to achieve it, and then a machine is going to actually be able to encode all of that information and manage your portfolio for a very small, fixed amount of money. Doesn't happen now, but it will happen in about 10 years.
So your thinking is that the high-level policy will be created by a human, and the machine that will execute on the policy and come up with the actual mechanics of the trading and so on.
And more importantly, we'll be able to provide investors with the narrative of why they lost the money that they lost and why they shouldn't cash out now, why should they stick with the course, get back in, and be able to ride that kind of a wave over the course of a 10 or 20-year investment period to be able to retire it in the style to which they would like to become accustomed.
And it's measured in Bitcoins.
No comment.
or Ethereum or whatever. So Fred, what do you think?
Groundskeepers are fine. Construction workers are fine. Doctors are gone. You won't be going to see a doctor. Or what you call a doctor is a data scientist. Because today it's kind of ludicrous, right? It used to be that we valued somebody that had read the journals and was up on the medication. And they're still trying to do that today, not accounting for the variations in genomes that you have that you could easily understand by income strata and geography and lineage. They're looking at journals that they read last week instead of every possible thing that's been tried. And so talk about an industry that's going to be disrupted for the better for all of us. But when we talk about white collars happening first, the jobs that people should be most worried about are things like doctors.
Yeah, but where's the blending, though?
Well, the blending is right now.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So take doctors, right? Is there a role in the medical field?
They're going to diagnose you properly, and you're not going to die, right? That's the benefit. So you're going to go in, and you're going to have some kind of symptoms, but instead of resting on a very finite mindset of a brilliant person who's wonderfully dedicated, I think doctors are wonderful, but you're going to open up that diagnosis in a statistically relevant construct with way more information that in real time can not only give you information back, but can adjust prescriptions with better forecast of predictability than waiting 3 or 4 months for a drug to kick in and observing whether you're alive or growing, God knows what else. So the application of applying real-time machine learning with the kind of relevance and customization you need is then going to inform the medical professional if they have to provide a procedure or something, which they're going to control with robots, of course.
I guess there are many examples today, like with robot-assisted surgeries and so on, where pretty much in the medical field, there's just incredible blending of the two already.
But it's going to determine what you should do, not help you do it.
Can I cut in, give you a quick example? One of my colleagues, Regina Barzilay, here at CSAIL, has developed machine learning algorithms to look at X-rays to detect breast cancer. And this machine learning algorithm is about as accurate as a human radiologist looking at the same X-rays. But what she found is that the machine learning algorithm, together with the radiologist, was actually even more accurate than either of those by themselves. That's an example. We'll see more of those.
Fantastic. Sanjay?
Thanks for the assist.
In general, healthcare will see a lot of such intelligent intervention, including, we are doing in the lab some research on detecting from your voice tonal quality autism, for example, right? So there are a lot of interesting ways you can diagnose a condition of people. But coming to your question on how do I see, in particular, my industry getting disrupted, I think one of the key things to know is deep learning in particular. You don't have to really code. So when you are looking at a future when you really don't need to program, because the earlier pattern was you program, the humans program, and then the computer executes that program using some data. But the new pattern emerging is the deep learning algorithms, you show them the data, they develop the program. You really don't know how they come to the conclusion, but you are very soon coming to a situation where the AI will be the coder, or the AI will write its own program. So 20 years down the line, the whole ecosystem in my industry will change. What's going to be the role of humans in keeping in the whole programming industry? So that will be something we'll have to reinvent and rediscover.
Well, fantastic. This was great. I want you all to join me in thanking our panel for this amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.